Awakening Lions is what this hour will also be about. Kate Mason has an extensive background in welfare and community development. She has spent the last 3 years getting up to speed with the global narratives which are shepherding us into a dystopian world of surveillance. Goodness me, where humans, the environment, where we live, what we eat, our genetic code, etc., are all being razed to the ground so we can build back better. You've heard that term, haven't you? Kate endeavours to get as much of the bigger picture as possible. As she follows different global narratives, is increasingly aware that they are all colliding into a powerful net of vested interests and monitored people, leading to massive wealth transfers, all being orchestrated through our government. Kate is a member of Community Voice Australia, which advocates for government and public-private partnership transparency and that people have a genuine voice in matters affecting them and their environment. Kate Mason, welcome to Weekends. Creating problems with the so-called problems that they invent for us. Where are we headed now in terms of food?
So that's all heating up really big time in Australia. So the first, and they call it cultured quail, but it's actually lab-created quail. They work out how what words you use so people don't become alarmed. So the first lab-created meat is in progress in Australia to be allowed into the food market. And that's all going ahead. I had a look through. So the company is called VOW, VOW Foods, and the body, the Australian and New Zealand body that oversees the regulations is the Food Safety Australia New Zealand. And they're in process to amend the Australian New Zealand Food Code to allow for cell-based food within Australia. And if it goes ahead, it will allow VOW Food to sell their lab meat in Australia. So that's where we're heading. And then it just opens up the door for every other sort of lab meat. So one of the founders, there's two founders of VOW. I had a quick look at their funding, who's funding them and who they've got grants for, and found Saudi Arabian oil and gas company with chemical interests, as one of their funders. But I need to spend a little bit more time in there. But they're really big guys that are funding this VOW, who just look like cool, hip, groovy young men talking about climate change, and we need to change, the way we eat. They make it very clear, like if you search, it'll say, this won't replace traditional agriculture, this won't replace meat. However, I found a video where George, who's one of the founders, was talking about it, and the interviewer, like probably a year or two ago. And the interviewer said to him, how are farmers going to cope with this, lab meat transformation of the food system? And he said, just like horses are no longer used for transport and are a niche enjoyment, he foresees the same thing may happen where there's a few regenerative farms left, or ethical farms he called it, where it's for wealthy people to buy meat from so they can hark back to previous times and show they can afford the luxury, but it will not be the mainstream experience. So that's what he said, and that is the narrative that's being that is being said all over the place. The Bayer Monsanto, so CropLife is the big, massive chemical companies that are all connected in with CRISPR and, lab foods and everything else. They signed a partnership with the United Nations Food and Agricultural Organization, I think around 2020. So this is where we are heading. And there's a quote by Tony Hunter, a futurist for food, where he just says food is going to be, instead of farmers making food, technology companies will make food. And that's where we're heading. And there's massive issues in this, because it's not only the health, the really big concerns of health, because it relies on immortalization of cells, which means you just keep a cell endlessly reproducing in a vat. And that, technically speaking, is precancerous, and in some cases can be fully cancerous. So there's that aspect. There's the aspect that they put synthetic vitamins and minerals into it, so nothing is natural. And the submission is open to allow, FSANZ wants to hear what we have to say, the public has to say, and it closes on February the 5th. So we're going to put a submission in. They even say there's, too high levels of, artificial vitamins and everything in this, but because people won't be eating too much of it, it won't matter. So they say that, but yet you can hear that this is the way that food is going. You can hear it from a lot of different areas that's where they're planning to go with food, that it's lab created. So yes, I think I want people also to be aware about that's taking off, and not only the health issues, but imagine when every single food source is patented. That's what it leads to. You don't actually, I think he even might have said it, George might have said it from Val, you won't have like milk, you'll have another name for an artificial milk.
Yes.
So it's a product. It's not like milk that, I mean, it's increasingly hard for someone to be a farmer anyway, but, where people can just produce a few things and you can buy, generic things off them, you will be buying products, patented products off companies, tech companies, basically.
Two points to bring up there is that you now wonder why it was that Bill Gates is the number one landowner in the United States. Is he doing that so that he can breed his special natural cattle for the elite cronies that are coming? We saw at Davos the usual suspects arriving in their expensive, oil burning vehicles and aeroplanes arriving, etc. So it's very clear now that when you've mentioned that and the evidence there to prove it, the video from George, the founder of Val Foods, is coming out and saying that it will be food production for the elites to feel like that this is how it works. Quite incredible, isn't it? That we live in a world that we're told every single day it's beaten over the head, equality, equality, equality. And what they're really doing is now separating themselves from the rest of us in a way that pretty much shows that they believe that they are not the same as us. Kate, farmers are a pretty resilient bunch. I reckon that they've got some sort of rearguard action. Can you tell us what's going on?
So in February the 6th, there's a rally in Canberra at Parliament House called the Reckless Renewables Rally. So if you look around the world, you will see farmers fighting back in a vast array of countries because they're completely being smashed from different things. So here in Australia, it's the massive rollout of what they call renewables and the transmission lines, which is destroying and going to destroy communities, the natural environment and the farming land. So the government says it won't destroy the farming land, but from everything I've heard and read, people can't live around these wind turbines, and they're also very toxic. They've got BPA in the blades. There's massive issues about having these normally international bodies that end up being given the contracts to build it, and then they have all these rights over your land as well. So yes, theoretically you could probably have sheep around them, but the sheep aren't going to do very well because BPA is an endocrine disruptor and you're going to end up with massive amounts of toxicity. So and then people are going to, just normal farmers who have some land and are doing it, are going to move out because they can't, the whole family is going to, the community will fall apart and the whole family is, the health of their families is going to need to come first. So then you're going to have another transfer of wealth of farming land over to, the very wealthy who are waiting and know that this is in the works. So in Australia, the farmers are fighting back. There's a farmer that I've interviewed a few times from out west, and he's very, very active, and he started up with a group of other people, National Rational Energy Network. And they are just bringing all people and all farmers together around Australia, as well as conservationists. There's a lot of conservationists who were very into renewable energy until they actually saw firsthand what it was doing to the environment. There's a massive pushback around the destruction of the environment going on in areas, as well as the wind turbines in the ocean and concerns about that. So 6th of February at Parliament House in Canberra, it starts at 10 a.m. Lots of farmers. I'm going to talk about food because the farmers will often say, well, where's our food source going to come from? And I'm like, well, they don't really need you. And I think that it's really important that farmers and other people get the actual bigger picture as to why farming land is being overrun.
Gosh, it sounds like it is. I mean, imagine being a farmer right now and thinking, well, hang on a second, I'm in debt up to my eyeballs. We've had one or two bad seasons. Do I just give up and get off the land? But at the same time, how can I give up this third or fourth generation family business here? It almost reminds me of what we see if anyone's ever watched that TV series Yellowstone, and just when you watch and see how hard these ranchers are fighting for there. And this is just fiction. And then, of course, it goes into the prequels, and you see that this is a story that's been going for 100 and something years. And then you realize that this is not just somebody who bought into a farm 5 years ago and it's a hobby and they got successful at it, it's been taken away. This is generational now, and you can see why there is such a big deal. But at the same time, not realizing, when a farmer thinking, hang on a second, what do you mean we're not going to need farmers anymore? What are you going to eat? And that's, Kate, where you come in, I suppose, and you talk about people like Val Foods. Yeah, we're just going to print cells. I mean, people must be fired up, nervous, and confused all at the same time. And so there's this emotional war going on, but then the unintended consequences that the conservationists are now realizing, hang on a second, we've been barking up the wrong tree here. And it's in those situations where you get an unexpected turn of events, and then people go against the system, buck the system.